Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Morning, sir.
How are you?
Fine.
Fine. Thank you so much for today's lesson. Today we want to talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. Just to remember anything that we discussed about the directory before we talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. Anything that is to remember about the directory, because we can't talk about Napoleon Bonaparte without talking about the directory. Anything that is to remember about the directory. Anything that is to remember. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we see that the directory it failed. Why? It is because of the uprisings. People were rising during the time of the directory. What else do you still remember about the directory? Yes. Yes, the directory it had so much weaknesses. Weaknesses such as what? Let's specify. Which weaknesses can we talk about that were experienced by the directory? Any weaknesses that you still remember? Any weaknesses that were experienced by the directory? Yes. Yes, newspapers, they were censored. They only talked about the goodness of what? Of the directory. What else? Yes, my daughter? Yes, the unfair system of justice. So because of that now, the directory, it was unpopular. Why? It is because it failed in so many ways. It failed in so many aspects. So what are we saying? We are saying that Napoleon utilized on those weaknesses that were experienced by the directory, and it led to his rise. So I'm going to write the weaknesses that we witnessed by the directory, and those weaknesses now they are going to play a vital role, a significant role in the rise of Napoleon. Which were these weaknesses? Number A, we see that we had political weaknesses. Political weaknesses. Here on political weaknesses, we see that there were uprisings. Uprisings were taking place at time and again. We also see that there was Bebefu, the Bebefu conspirators. Conspirators. The Bebefu conspirators, they conspired against the government, and that on its own led again to the rise of Napoleon. We also talk about the issue of the unfair system of justice. Unfair system of justice. The system of justice that was there, it was unfair during the time of the directory. The directory again, it was what? It was a corrupt. It used bribes. The leaders they used bribes to retain their position. For example, you talk about Barras, who remained at the helm of the territory by using bribes. So because of that now, we see that we have got a guy known as Napoleon now, yet to utilize yet to use this to his advantage. If you vote for me, if you elect me, if you've got confidence in me, I'm going to revive the political atmosphere in the in the country. So as a result of that now, it led to the rise of Napoleon. Then we also see that we had also our economical weaknesses. Let's talk about these economical weaknesses. Economical weaknesses of the directory. The directory, we see that when they came to power, they did away, they removed the money that was there. The money that was there was known as the assignats. So they replaced the assignats with a new paper money which was known as the mandates. So by replacing the assignments, replacing with the mandates, we see that inflation started to exist in the country. The money that they introduced, the mandate, it lost value. It was worthless. The prices of goods, they skyrocketed. Why? It is because the money that was introduced was worthless. So because of that now, people were angered. People were frustrated about the directory. And because of that now, some historians, they say that the directory, it was a child born dead, or that the directory, it was non-existent. or that the directory, it was ill-fated from birth. Why was it ill-fated from birth? Why was it doomed from the start? Why was a child born dead? It was because of the mandates that they introduced. These mandates which were useless, which were valueless. So now he is promising the people now, if you've got confidence in me, if you vote for me, if you've got courage in what electing me to be a new leader now, I'm going to revive the economy. And you're going to see Napoleon reviving the economy when he came to power. How did he do that? You're going to see how the Bank of France was introduced. We're also going to talk about the issue of commerce and industry. We see that France was industrialized, and by so doing now, the economy of the country thrived because of the what new economical reforms that were introduced by Napoleon. So the business people now, they started to have confidence, in what, in Napoleon, and that led to the rise of Napoleon. Then you move on. You talk about number C. You talk about a social what social reforms that were experienced by the directory, which led them to be unpopular. Number one, they were sexually corrupt. They were sexually corrupt. They were sexually what are corrupt. If you are saying that sexually corrupt, they were morally corrupt. For example, if you are a leader, you are not supposed to nyenga. And if you nyenga when you are a leader, people will lose confidence in you. And why? Because you are a role model. Everything, anything that will be doing, people will be watching you. So by so doing now, it meant that people lost confidence in the directory because they were still nyengering. You can talk about Barras, who yet to nyenga Talleyrand's wife. And so we see Talleyrand's wife was Barras' mistress. So people lost confidence. Oh, you are led by those people who are still nyengering. So because of that, now people lost confidence in them. So that now led Napoleon now to rise to power. If you've got confidence in me, if you vote for me now, I'm going to establish a society which is stable. And that is what he did. We're going to also talk about the Code Napoleon, in which laws were codified, in which we see that he had to introduce what were known as the our civil code, which had to revive the social nature, or the issue of marriages, the issue of the family, and by so doing now, Napoleon managed to get a confidence. Then we move on. Let's move on again, still on the on the social. Still on the social, we want to move on, and we want to talk about number B. There was the drought. We are on number C. There was the drought of 1795. A serious drought occurred in 1795, and when it occurred, the people expected the directory to assist them with food, but the directory could not assist the people with food, so it led to the unpopularity of the directory. It explains why also Napoleon came to what? To power. It was because of the promises that he was promising the people, reviving the problem that the people were facing in the country. So that explains why Napoleon eventually rose to a power. You move on also, Anangu, you also talk about another social problem. Which problem are we talking about? The problem of unemployment. So many people were unemployed. So that possibly explains why upright people were rising. Why were they? It was because they did not have anything to do. So because of that now, we see that Napoleon now promising the people, if you vote for me, if I come to power, I'm going to create public works. And by having these public works now, the problem of unemployment is going to be solved. So by so doing, we see Napoleon are coming to power. Then you move on, you talk about the last aspect, which is the church. The relations between the state and the church, they were antagonized during the time of the convention. You remember Herbert. What did Herbert do? What did Herbert do? If you still remember, Herbert during the time of the convention, what did he do? If you still remember, what did Herbert do? Who can still remember? What did Herbert do during the time of the convention? What did Herbert do? Yes, Manang. Excellent. He introduced Herbertism, which was also known as what? Atheism, a new religion in which he had to sweep, or he had to do away with Catholicism, he had to do away with the church, and they introduced what was known as atheism, a new belief that was based on reasoning. People were supposed to reason on how best the revolution was supposed to be a success. So we see that the relations between the state and the church, they were antagonized by habit during the time of during the time of the convention. So when the directory came to power, they were supposed to revive those good relations that used to exist between the church and the state, but they did not do so. A number of people in France, they were Catholics, so they were supposed to be in good terms with the church, but they could not do so. So it led to their unpopularity. So Napoleon had to capitalize on these weaknesses of the directory, and it explains why Napoleon eventually came to power. So now we are supposed to know about the political weaknesses of the directory. We have talked also about the economical weaknesses of the directory. We have also talked about the social weaknesses of the directory, which led Napoleon to come to what? To power. So Napoleon came to power because of the weaknesses of the directory. Then number two, we also see that we have got another factor which played an important part in the rise of Napoleon. Which factor is this? Which factor is this? We have talked about the weaknesses of the directory. Which other factor led to the rise of Napoleon? Which other factor led to the rise of Napoleon? Yes, my daughter. His character, the ability of Napoleon, his charisma, he is described as a man of destiny. He is described as a man who was determined for success. He is described by D. Thompson as a man of few snatches of sleep, a man who was determined that he was supposed to be successful. Napoleon, it is said that whenever he was walking, whenever he was just telling himself that I'm going to be a successful person, I'm going to be so successful. So it was because of that character, that charisma, that led to the rise of Napoleon. That led him to come to power in 1799. So you talk about the charisma of Napoleon, the character, the personality of Napoleon. Then eventually, number three, we talk about the coup d'etat. The coup d'etat. Napoleon staged a coup d'etat. What is a coup? Chirungu. Cop. Magamboa, or yet someone. I met him and I gave him a cop. You know the Russian? My muchka, a cop. You know the Russian, my daughter? It means, what is a cop? Who can try? A cop. A cop. We are talking about what? Yes, mister. You're talking about overthrowing the government by force, using force to overthrow the government. So Napoleon, we see that after the Egyptian campaign, he tried to remove the directory by force. He failed. But on the second coup d'etat, with the assistance of Hussein, he was in a position of removing the government, which was known as the directory. So Napoleon also came to power. Why? Because of the coup d'etat that he staged, removing the government that was there by force. This never know. It's so clear. Good. Then last one, number four. Napoleon also came to power. Why? It was because of the Italian campaign. The Italian campaign. The Italian campaign. I'm going to talk about this Italian campaign again in detail so that you can understand. So I want you to write subject in Italian campaign. Good. On the Italian campaign, we see that there was a country which was known as Austria. This country that was known as Austria, it controlled areas that were in Italy. There were important areas that were in Italy that were controlled by Austria. Which were these areas? Which were these areas that were in Italy that were controlled by Austria? Which were these areas? Yes, my daughter. Excellent. So number one, we have got what? Lombardy and what? Venetia. Good. Number two, yes, my daughter. Naples and what? And Sicily. Antica. Good. Which other area? Which other area that was in Italy that was controlled by Austria? Yes, my daughter. Yes, excellent. Number three, we have got what? Modena, Parma, and what? Tuscany. So these were the three areas that were in Italy. Hmm? They were in Italy, but they were controlled by what? By Austria. And so what happened? We see that Napoleon, as the army general, as the army commander, he declared war against Austria. Hmm? And when he declared war against Austria, Austria thought that she was going to defeat Napoleon of France. But unfortunately, what happened? Austria was defeated. So when she was defeated, she lost the areas that she controlled in Italy, which were these areas Lombi and Vene, and Nepo and Sicily, which was also known as two Sicilies. And then Modena, Parma, and Tuscany. I usually refer this one as Uzumba Maramba Pungwe. And you remember in Zimbabwe, Uzumba Maramba Pungwe. So you talk about Palma, Modena, and Tuscany. So because of that, now Austria was lowered. She was Mbumruad. When she was Mbumruad, now we see that Napo, he became a champion. He became a celebrity. Ah, how are you? How are you? Do you know Napo? Are you a Napo Wakapenga? Do you know Napo? Napo is Napo. And so everyone was Napo, Napo, because it was the first victory of France after so many years. So because of that now, it explains why Napoleon came to power. He was in a position of bringing that pride, that glory that France was associated with. So this was a success, and it explains why Napoleon eventually came to power. So Wanangu, these are the factors that we're supposed to know that led to the rise of Napoleon. Do you have any questions? Did you understand what we are talking about?
Yes.
Is it clear?
Yes.
Seriously clear?
Yes.
Ah, that is excellent. So let's move on and talk about the domestic policies of Napoleon. The domestic policies of Napoleon. So write the subheading domestic policy. The domestic policy. So we are going to group Napoleon's domestic policy into three important categories or three important groups. Which are these groups that we can think of? That we can classify, group Napoleon's domestic policies. Yes, my daughter? Yes, we've got political domestic policies, good. Which other? Yes, my daughter? Economical domestic policies, good. Yes, my daughter? Social domestic what? Policies. So let's start with political. So let's write number one. We write political. We write political. So we want to talk about political domestic what? Policies of Blazo Napoleon. So number one, we are going to talk about number 1A, the consulate. The consulate. We talk about the consulate. The consulate. So what are we saying, Vanangu? We are saying that Napoleon introduced a constitution which was known as the consulate. This was a constitution. This is what the people in France wanted. They wanted a ruler who was going to rule them using a what? A constitution. So we see that he introduced the consulate, a constitution. How was it organized? So I want to show you how it was organized. Then after that, now we discussed in what? In detail. So here on the consulate, we see that, let me explain here. At the consulate here, we see that at the top there was the first consul. So Napoleon introduced himself as the consul. He was the consul. So as the consul, he was the leader who was responsible about what was taking place in the country. He was the consul. Then below the consul, there was also what an organ that was there. It was known as what? Below the consul, there was what was known as what? Yes, my daughter? Yes, there was what was known as the council of what? Of state. There was what was known as the council of what? of State. Council of what? Of State. Good. Then below the Council of State, there were also people who were there. It was also known as what in this constitution? As membership. There were also people who were there in the Council of State. These were known as the what? In the Council of State. There were also people who were there. They were known as what? As what? Yes, my daughter? Yes, there was also what was known as the legislative what assembly. Legislative what? Assembly. Good. Then below the legislative assembly, there was what was known as what? Yes, my daughter? The tribunate. Good. What was known as the tribunate. Good. Then below the tribunate, there was what was known as what? Yes, madam? Yes, the local council. There was what was known as the local what council. So this is how the constitution was organized. There was the first consul, the council of state, the legislative assembly, the tribunate, and the local what? A council. So we see that here Napoleon he established himself as the first consul, and he had executive authority. He was responsible about what was taking place in the what in the country. Then below him here there was the Council of State. This was an upper chamber. It was an upper chamber. It acted like a senate. It was more or less like a senate. The Council of what? Of State. The members who were in the Council of State, they were directly appointed by Napoleon. So that on its own clearly revealing that Napoleon he was a despot. Why? Because he directly appointed people who were in the what? In the Council of what? Of State. So it means that Napoleon he was a child of the French Revolution to a lesser what extent. Why? Because he appointed people. People wanted to vote for their representatives. So here he was a despot. Then below that now with the legislative what assembly, these were the members of parliament. They were elected by the people. France was too big. We had La Vendée, we had Marseilles, we had Lyon, we had Paris, we had Versailles. All those areas they had members of parliament who were elected to represent the local people, the people in those areas. So the what legislative assembly. But here again, we see that Napoleon suggested members who were going to be members of parliament from the Bonapartist here to suggest, okay, at Marseilles there is Johnson. Johnson, I like him because he is Johnson. You are saying that. So Johnson was appointed to become the MP for Marseilles. So that on its own again revealed that Napoleon he was a child of the French Revolution to a lesser extent because he influenced what took place. Then below here, we had the tribunate, the tribune, which was the system of justice. It is said that the lawyers who were in this tribune, they were chosen by Napoleon. And whenever they met, Napoleon was present. So by so doing, again, clearly showing us that Napoleon, he was a what? A despot. Then below that, we had the local councils. The local councils that were supposed to represent the what? At the local people. Wasn't that? Like, for example, in Kadoma, you have in a local council. In Kwekwe, a local council. In Chegutu, a local council. In Harare, local council. They're supposed to represent the interest of what? Of the people. But here now, it is important again to note that Napoleon, he had to infest the local councils with his supporters. So many of his supporters, they were in what? In this organ, the local council. So this is how he organized his what? A constitution. From what we have said here now, we have seen that Napoleon, he was a despot, and to a greater what extent. Why? Because people here he appointed, here he suggested, here he was there, here people were his supporters. So we are saying that in this what constitution, Napoleon he was a dictator. Napoleon he was a what? A despot. But from what I have said here, we can also say that he was a child of the French Revolution. Why? It is because this constitution, it was what? It was organized in order, and the duties of the people who were in the constitution, they were clearly specified. They were clearly what are specified. They were clear. The duties were so clear. So that is what the people wanted. They wanted a ruler who was going to rule them using a constitution. So by ruling the people with the constitution, we can say that Napoleon was a child of the French Revolution. So the consulate, we can say that it was a success. Why? It is because he had to seek assistance from the legislative assembly. So it's two-sided. So it's up to you whether you say it's to a great extent he was a child or to a less extent. But from what I've said, you can see that he was a despot to a greater extent. Don't forget that Napo, he was a soldier. So as a soldier now, we see that he was going to dominate the political atmosphere of the country. So that is what we have now on the political reform basing on the consulate that was introduced by Napoleon. Are we understanding?
Yes.
It's so simple. Good. Let's move on and talk about number 2. Under political, we are still under political. We want to talk about number 2. Under political. All right, good. Number 2, under political, let's talk about what took place in 1804. In 1804, who wants to try what happened in 1804? Who wants to try 1804? Can come forward, then you explain to us what took place in 1804. What happened in 1804? Wants to try what happened in 1804? Wants to try? Yes, Grace, thank you so much. You can tell us about what transpired in 1804. Good.
In 1804, we see that Napoleon established himself as the emperor for life.
Excellent. He established himself as the emperor for life. Let's write that one. He established himself as the emperor for life. He established himself as the emperor for life. Good, my daughter.
We also see that he introduced the so-called sacrilege laws.
Excellent. Again, another point again. He introduced what was known as the sacrilege laws. Good. He introduced again what was known as the sacrilege laws. Excellent, my daughter. What else again?
We also see that in 1804, Napoleon declared that elections were going to take place after 10 years.
Brilliant! Elections were going to take place after 10 years. That is brilliant. And let's have that one again. Elections were going to take place after 10 years. That's excellent, my daughter. Good. All right, good. So let's just clap hands for you. Let's just clap hands for you. That is good, my daughter. It's so good. And so we see that Napoleon in 1804 sacrilege. Chirungu vanangu sacrilege. You know, sacrilege. She talked about chirungu. Chakadzika sacrilege. What does it mean? Sacrilege. Possibly some might not understand what it means. Even those who are watching online, sacrilege. What does it mean? Sacrilege. What does it mean? Sacrilege. Yes, my daughter. Something holy and something sacred. So what happened? He was coronated. So let's add another point. In 1804, Napoleon was coronated. In 1804, Napoleon was coronated. He was what? He was coronated. Holy oil was put on him. So holy oil, then after that, Isaac as the monarch, was the emperor, the king now. So holy oil was poured upon him. Then after that, he was going to put on a head of a monarch or a king, wasn't that? So because of that, now he was now filled with holiness. He was now filled with greatness. So no one was now supposed to oppose or to say anything against Napo. You say, Napo, I know you, Barans, Napo. You were going to be arrested because you committed an offense, offense against the law of what? Of sacrilege. So we talk about that. So we move on. She also talked about the issue of newspapers being not censored, elections being not suspended. So by so doing now, we see that it clearly showed that Napoleon, he was a dictator. Napoleon, he was a what? A despot. This never know. It's so simple. Never know. Good. So this is what we talk about on the political reforms that were introduced by Napoleon. The consulation, they were the consulate, not consolation, the consulate that he introduced, and also talk about what took place in 1804. But we can also add something again, Manangu. After 1804, there are also two incidents that took place. What happened, Manangu? We can still remember about two incidents that we can also include. Two incidents that we can also include. Two incidents that we can also include that took place in 1809. What happened in 1809? We can still remember what happened again in 1809. Politically, Napoleon, what did he do? 1809. Yes, my daughter.
Napoleon arrested the Pope.
Oh, munhu wamwari was sungwad. And he sungad munhu wamwari. He arrested the Pope in 1809. And then so that on its own clearly shows that he did not want opposition. And what else did he do? Yes, my daughter. Brilliant! He reintroduced the sacrilege. What? Not sacrilege. He reintroduced the latre de catches. So that on its own again, revealing that Napoleon, he was a despot to a greater what extent. Is that so? Huh? All right, good. Let's move on and talk about the economical domestic policies of Blazo Napoleon. So let's write subject in economical policies. Economical policies. So number 2, economy. Blazo economy. This one is very simple. We are going to have again a person who is going to talk about the economy. Anything that is to remember, anything that you remember that was done by Blazo Napo in his economy. Anyone wants to come and tell us what Napo did in his economical domestic policies? Anyone wants to come and tell us? That was done by Napo. Even 1 point or 2 points is still okay. Anything that you still remember on what on the economy wants to come. Yes, number 1, she's going to tell us. Number 1, she's going to tell us anything that you know about the economy, any economical activities that you still remember on Napoleon. Come forward. Come forward. All right, while Trish is coming, someone again prepare. Someone again to prepare. Who is that? Who's got? All right, you've got my. Yes, all right, good. Anything that you remember on the economy, my daughter?
In the economy of the domestic policy of Napoleon, commerce and industry was increased. Industries were developed and it increased employment.
Excellent, my daughter. Let's clap hands for you. Let's clap hands for you. So she talked about the issue of what? Of commerce and what? And industries. And so industrialization started, factories were what? Were introduced. So let's write that point. Issue industrialization, issue commerce. Thank you, my daughter. Good. Issue industrialization, issue commerce, issue of industrialization, the issue of what? Commerce. Good. I'll add more flesh. Who else wants to come forward and also tell us? Yes, my Yezi.
Taxation was normalized through the Bank of
Speak up, speak up. They're not hearing.
Taxation was normalized through the Bank of Funds.
Excellent issue of taxation. Let's write taxation. It was normalized through the issue of what? Industry and commerce. Taxation, it was normalized. Good.
And new agricultural schemes were reformed like crop rotation.
Excellent. New agricultural schemes. Excellent. New agricultural schemes were introduced, e.g., crop rotation. New agricultural schemes, and they were introduced. That is excellent. Another point again under economy, my Priscilla. Another point under economy. While Priscilla she's coming, another one prepare. Another one prepare on the economy. Anything on the economy.
Napoleon created public works such as construction of schools, bridges, and roads.
That is excellent. Another important point: employment, the issue of public works, they were started. That is excellent. And by so doing, the problem of unemployment, it was solved. Thank you, my daughter. The issue of employment. And this can do good. Another issue that you can also think about. Another issue that you can also think about. Another issue that you can also think about. Another issue? Yes, my daughter? Telecommunication was also improved. Telecommunication was also improved. Good. Another, another, another. Telecommunication. Yes, my daughter? Trade was also improved. Good. Trade was also improved. Patient? Another economical reform. Another economic. Roads, rail lines, roads were construction, were what constructed. That is excellent, my daughter. Issue of roads, construction, roads they were constructed. Some were widened, and roads were constructed, roads were widened. Telecommunication started. I was saying that goods train, goods trains, and carrying commodities from one city to another. So, from the economical activities that we have talked about, Wanangu, we see that the Frenchman gained value. We see that the prices of goods they became affordable to so many people in the what in the country. So by so doing now, Napoleon became a champion. He became a darling of the people. How far? How are you, Napo? Why it was Napo? It is because of the economical reforms that he introduced. So let's summarize them so that you could remember these economical what policies. So number one, we've talked about the issue of what of industry and what and commerce. So industrialization, then commerce, you are talking about what trade. And then we have talked also about the issue of what of taxation. Taxation was what was normalized. And then we have talked also about the issue of infrastructure and infrastructural what development, infrastructural what development. And then we have also talked about the issue of employment, the issue of what of employment. Public works they were started. Good. Then we moved on. We also have talked about the issue of what farmers in the rural areas. My farmers in the rural areas, farmers in the rural what, areas. They were assisted, they were given inputs, they were given implements, and France became self-sufficient because of supporting the farmers who were in the rural what, areas. And then we talk about what the Bank of France. The Bank of France, it was what it was introduced, and this Bank of France it gave loans to the people to start self-reliant what projects. So as a result of that, now we see people benefiting in the sense that the problems of lumo became a thing of the past. People had what food in abundance. Why? It was because they were getting these loans from the Bank of what of France. So from the economical activities, economical reforms that were introduced by Napoleon, let's comment. What can we say? Was he a child of the French Revolution? If you are saying the child of the French Revolution, we are talking about his reforms. Were those reforms that were expected by the people? Were those reforms that were wanted by the people when they revolted in 1789? Did he fulfill the ideals of the French Revolution? Did he fulfill what the people wanted when they revolted in 1789? What can we say? Let's comment. Was he successful in this? Yes. Is it to a greater or to a lesser? To a greater what? Extent. But however, to a lesser extent, we see that there were some more elements of despotism. We can see that to a lesser extent, Napoleon was less successful. Where can we say that he was a success to a lesser what extent? Where can we say that, yes, my daughter? On the Bank of France. Why do we say so on the Bank of France? It was because he is the one who what? Who appointed the governor of the Bank of what? France. So he was successful to a what? Lesser what? Extent. Why? Because he appointed the governor of the Bank of France. Another point again. Another point on the Bank of France. What can we say? We can also comment there are elements of despotism on the Bank of France. Where? Yes, my daughter? Excellent loans. That is brilliant, my daughter. Loans they were given to the Bonapartists at the expense of the other classes in the what? In the society. So Napoleon was less what? Successful. This never know. Is it clear? Good. Let's move on and talk about the last aspect in his domestic policy, which is the social what? what are reforms. So I want you to, with your partner, Andiga, then you look. I will just pick any. You tell us what Napoleon did in his social reforms. The partner who is next door to you, I want you to discuss and tell us any reforms that Napoleon introduced in his domestic policies. All right, good. Let's now have your feedback. Let's have your feedback. Let's start with group number one at the back. What did you see on Napoleon's domestic reforms socially? Excellent. So number one, they talked about the concordat. Con, the concordat of 1801. Good. What happened here on the concordat of 1801? Excellent. He signed an agreement with the church in 1801, which was known as the Concordat. The relations between the state and the church, they were antagonized during the time of Hebetism, time of convention, during the time of the reign of terror. So Napoleon realized that for him to get a lot of support from the people, what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to be in good books with what? With the church. So that explains why he signed the Concordat of 1801. It was a success to a greater what extent. This is why it is because relations were normalized between the Pope and the church. Good. Group two, what did you find on the social reforms? Excellent. Number two, you talk about the Legion of what? Of honor. The Legion of what? Of honor. Can you explain in detail what happened on the Legion of honor? Excellent. You honored those who excelled. So if you worked hard, if you were hardworking, if you did well, you were honored. So because of that, now we see that it was again a success to a what? A great what extent. But it is said that Napoleon mostly wanted to honor two groups of people. Who did he want to honor? Yes, he wanted to honor the majority. Don't forget he was a soldier, but he was targeting two groups of people in the society. He wanted to honor two groups. Which were these groups? Yes, my daughter? Yes, the army and the police. So if you worked hard, if you sung at the people, if you killed the people, it meant that you were going to be given a nyembe and a badge. And when you are walking, you're no longer walking like that what great repass pass. You're now walking as a what? As a leader. So because of that now, we see that according to Dennis Richards, that is why Napoleon was quoted as saying, what was he quoted as saying according to Dennis Richards? Napoleon, he was quoted as saying in Dennis Richards, yes, madam? Excellent. Men are led by what? Toys. Why toys? It is because you see, when children are playing, and they'll be having a brick, and then they will woo, woo, that brick will be acting like a car, but it's not a car. Also, that then if you take that brick, that child will cry, "Ah, you took my car, but you took the brick." Or that. But inside him, he's telling himself that he's got a what? He's got a car. So if you're given a nyembe, what happens now? You no longer walk like a person who wants to die. You walk confident. Why? It is because you were promoted. So because of that, now you continue working hard so that you could be given another nyembe. That. So men are led by what? Choice. So there is an element of progression, but also there is an element of what? Despotism. And good. Let's also move on. Group number 3. Yes, the code Napoleon. Very good. We also talked about what? The code what? Napoleon. What happened here on code Napoleon? he what he introduced these laws which he what codified into
The civil code.
the civil code. Good.
The criminal code.
Number B, the criminal code.
And commercial code.
Number C, the commercial code. Very good. Let's start with the civil code. It talked about what?
The civil code, it dealt with issues of the family like divorce.
Excellent. Civil code, it dealt about the issues of the family. And this got property, inheritance, marriage, divorce. Then the criminal code,
Dealt with issues of criminality like theft, fighting,
it dealt with issues of what? Of a criminality. Then eventually we have got the commercial code, which dealt with issues of what? Of trade, selling, and importation of what? Of goods. Yes, number 4.
There was the introduction of education.
Then we talk about the issue of what? Of education. Napoleon introduced what? Education. And the schools were built, primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary institutes, semi-military schools, and the University of what? Of France. That was important because we see that the literacy level improved in the country. But there was an element of indoctrination, and people were made to believe that Napoleon was the Messiah. So generally, these are some of the domestic policies that we have on Napoleon. So thank you so much on the domestic policies of Napoleon. Thank you.